Hey y'all, it's your girl Erin and welcome to another episode of LeftTube Tonight, the show where sub counts don't matter, but liberation of the working class does. And I've got a bunch of videos to show for you. Not all of the videos are made by leftists, but I think that they would be interesting to people on the left and in general. So the first video I'd like to recommend is Mexie's video on violence and the status quo, where she talks about the different kinds and contexts of violence. I found the idea of postponed violence being especially profound, and people get away with it because it's not dramatic. The consequences are decades away. Next up, NonCompete uploaded part 3 to their series on how anarchism would work in practice, focusing on the causes of crime, what do they do to prevent the people in the society from suffering harm from each other. It's another great addition to the series, and if you haven't seen part 1 or 2 yet, then they're also pretty good. You should go check them out. While we're on the topic of introductions to anarchism, I did come across a great one by Comrade Maxwell from April 2017, which I thought was really awesome, and so yeah, I also wanted to recommend that. And you can also have a look at the video I made about what I consider to be the pillars of anarchism, and I'm going to develop that into a series at some point too. So then next we have Peter Coffin's video Meritocracy, where Peter discusses what meritocracy is and why they're such a terrible idea, how merit gets defined, spoiler alert, by those who already have a lot of merit, or by what types of things gain you more merit. Something else that stood out to me was the take that criticisms of the system need to be more than just aesthetic reconfigurations, because otherwise you're feeding the problem instead of subverting it. So yeah, many hot takes as usual. Then Workers' Solidarity uploaded an interview and Q&A panel with Mark Bray about their book The Antifa Handbook, and they talk about all kinds of politics, especially fascism and anti-fascism, and there's a lot of discussions of grassroots activisms, which I found to be super interesting, so I think you should go have a look at that. And then Three Arrows talks about whether Hitler was a socialist or not. Spoiler alert, obviously not, but somehow people still claim this, so if you want a really great teardown of just how false that statement would be, then this is a great video. Next, Anarchopac does a response to Ben Shapiro's PragerU video. Ben is attempting to strawman intersectionality, and Anarchopac exposes this and does a really good job of explaining what intersectionality is in the process. Ben is trying to make intersectionality out to be just oppression Olympics, when actually it's a lot more, and the analysis has never been that simplistic. Then Maria the Witch talks about whiteness and why the concept of whiteness and the idea that there is such a thing as a white race needs to cease. The video also features AngieSpeaks, who goes over how there is more diversity among biological populations than between them. Onto the topic of gender, Maria also uploaded a video called Did Contra Side with Transphobia, where they talk about ContraPoints video aesthetics and discuss some of the context around it, speculating on what Contra might have been trying to say. So if you found some of the things in that video problematic or wonder why people have not been that happy about it, then maybe you should check that video out. And I don't think we should be shy of talking about when videos don't really make us that happy. And then for an in-depth response, Radiant2Pi released a video called The Appearance of the Aesthetic, where Radiant goes over the things in the video and discusses the arguments being made. And yeah, the idea of passing, or that other people get to cancel out your gender, I really don't agree with. So I agree with Radiant that Contra's video tends to portray the TERF arguments as a little stronger than the non-TERF arguments. And so that's why I personally didn't feel comfortable recommending that video on LeftTube Tonight when it came out. I appreciate the emotional labor put into this response by Radiant2Pi, because I personally found the aesthetics video to be quite traumatic. Then I also wanted to share a video from Barcroft TV, where they interview a woman with a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome and her struggle with the symptoms of it, like the facial hair that she grows. And I think it's another example of why, as a society, we can't afford ourselves to get stuck on fixed ideas of what gender or beauty are and allow that to influence our perception. I don't know about you, but I think that she's beautiful. And I think that if you can't see that, then maybe the problem is more with your head than actual diversity of beauty. Sometimes women's bodies just grow beards without asking them first. And I think it's time we left behind obsolete ideas about what you should or shouldn't look like as particular genders. Next we have Slimeface, who talks about their struggles with mental health, especially as it concerns their non-binary genderness. And I really admired the openness and vulnerability that Thought Slime has about their feelings. And while I don't personally identify as non-binary, I prefer the term unbinary because I consider myself to be fully a woman, just not a binary one. But I can relate to the struggle with a sort of non-binary gender expression. And I love the idea that Thought Slime suggests, kill the turf in your head. I think we should rather call them FARTs, which stands for Feminism Appropriating Reactionary Transphobes. Then Philosophy Tube talks about mental health and suicide and how the measure for mental health being your ability to function can marginalize a lot of people who have functioned but are just having worse time while doing it. And the ability to function definition of mental health has been used to pathologize many people who simply struggle to function because of oppression in society, not because there's anything wrong with them. It's like a whole lot of circular logic, but basically if you hate something hard enough, you can always make some kind of circular logic where the fact that people don't cope with your hate well enough reinforces your justification in doing the hate, which is complete rubbish. And then Vice talked about what it's really like to be a sex worker, talking to Lindsay Irene and their professional career photographing sex workers, as well as some of the sex workers that she photographs. And I think it was really cool to listen to sex workers who want to promote their own voice and combat the stigmas of sex work phobia. Swoops GTFO. Seriously, sex work is just like any other job. Then SciShow Psych released a video on the lesser known symptoms of depression, like irritability, memory loss, or feelings of overwhelming guilt, especially when you don't know what you did wrong. In my opinion, depression is often a symptom of capitalist society and its competitive modes of interacting with each other. Some people just don't enjoy competing, they would just rather be nice to each other and work together peacefully. They go over something called rumination and how that turns your brain's problem-solving capacity towards second-guessing yourself, and how that can have a negative influence on us, like draining our mental power, which makes it harder for us to do all the other things that require thinking. So then Jack Saint / Lacking Saint talks about Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland and how it failed to do sort of all the things it set out to do, like how it tried to insert some kind of feminist story arc to the story and then have the movie conclude with her giving in to expectations of her. So that was a really neat breakdown. Then Renegade Cut applied feminist critique to the Ready Player One movie and book. A really good breakdown of how the story suffered to pay fan service to cultural icons and how hollow the romance was. And it's not a surprise that a book and movie dedicated to pop culture, an era of rampant toxic masculinity, ended up echoing a lot of those sentiments. And then I wanted to share Riley J. Dennis's video where she tries to guess the genders or sexualities of all the characters in the Mario Tennis Aces game. They are all queer. I think queer washing in pop culture is awesome. And then Riley also talked about how in the upcoming Harry Potter movie, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, Voldemort's pet snake is revealed to be an Asian woman. and how that's pretty problematic, as well as talking about a lot of the other problematic choices in the Harry Potter books and movies, and how disappointing it is that could have used the new movie as an opportunity to fix those problems, and it would have made the movie so much better. And then moving on to some comedy/tragedy, some more news talked about Brett Kavanaugh and how he's a terrible judge, a liar, and why the Republicans don't care. And then some more news on Brett Kavanaugh. The vote hasn't happened yet, so I'll put the results on here if they come through before I finish editing, but basically I'm expecting that he's going to be confirmed, which really sucks, and I sincerely hope that this isn't a step towards The Handmaid's Tale. And then on a more positive note, I guess, Seriously Wrong podcast talks about work power versus electoralism. They go over the problems with electoralism and talk to some guests about electoral power and overall tactics on activism. And I think that voting can sometimes be a good strategic or tactical move to do, but ultimately the thing that's going to achieve liberation isn't going to come through voting or anything institutional. They did also talk about how it could potentially be used to challenge the state, which was cool. Then another great parody video by the Juice Media, this time about how Australia is going ahead with fracking and how the environmental protections have failed to protect them from huge corporate pollutions in the past. And so there's no ways that they're going to be able to manage the fracking pollution that's going to happen. So thank you for watching. I'm going to put a link down in the description for all the videos that I linked, as well as a link to the playlist, so that if you want to watch multiple of them, you can maybe just check the playlist out. And then I've also set up a Discord server, so if you want to chat to me about any of these videos or topics, or just anything and just hang out, then feel free to join. I'll put a link that should give you an invite to the Discord chat in the description as well. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Bye.